here because you heard the president today talking about Signal, which I was told he had to be briefed on what Signal was. Trump only really recently started texting in just a few years, regular text messaging. He says a lot of people in government use Signal. Is that accurate from what you know?
It is, but it raises a separate set of questions, some of which the Senator King just touched on there. One being, this is not a app that is designed or supposed to be allowed on government devices. So, are these conversations taking place on personal devices? That obviously was a question that went to DNI Gabbard today. She refused to answer. Both answers, whether it's a government device or a personal device, are separately troubling because you have to put this in the larger context of what is happening from our foreign adversaries in the United States cybersecurity world right now. There is a massive Chinese intrusion that goes by the name Salt Typhoon that has been pillaging U.S. cellular networks, and in last fall, actually, we know targeted the personal phone of Vice President J.D. Vance. So Signal is encrypted when the messages are going in between the Signal applications, but they are not encrypted on the home device if that device has already been penetrated by a foreign adversary. So if these are personal devices, not secured in the way that a government device would be, you could expect that a foreign adversary like Russia or China is actually actively reading that same text thread as Jeffrey Goldberg was.
Yeah, and of course we saw this be an issue during the campaign with attempts to infiltrate people's phones then on both sides. Given this, and given also the fact that these were messages on Signal, you can set for them to delete the messages, 1 hour, 1 day, a week. The messages were set to delete here. It's raised a lot of questions of just, the sanctity of that and preserving that and whether or not it violated the Federal Records Act as well. But there was an exchange today that I also want to get your take on between Senator Mark Warner and Director Gabbard about something that she said recently about classified information.
Tweeted just 11 days ago, and I'm quoting you. Any unauthorized release of classified information is a violation of the law and will be treated as such. So if this information is classified, what are you going to do?
Senator, 2 points here. First of all, there's a difference between inadvertent release versus
careless and sloppy,
malicious leaks of classified information. The second point is there was no classified information that was on
the information committee.
How big of a difference is there when it comes to if you're someone who's purposely leaking something, or whether or not inadvertently a reporter was added, another figure who does not have that security clearance was added to this conversation?
Yeah, so the criminal test in the federal statute is gross negligence. If you inadvertently give information entrusted to you as classified intelligence to someone not worthy of that trust. I would argue that probably adding, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov or Vladimir Putin to your group chat would be slightly more grossly negligent than adding the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic to your classified group chat, but only by a matter of degrees. I mean, this is by any sort of stretch of the imagination, this would launch a criminal investigation for any other figure in the U.S. government. And to your point on the disappearing messages, one of the things that is clear in the Federal Records Act is that the idea that Mike Walls actually reset the default disappearing messages so that they would disappear in 4 weeks, in 1 week, that is as clear a moment of intent as you could possibly want as an investigator to violate the Federal Records Act. And so this is clearly something also where none of these people objected in the moment to conducting these conversations on Signal. There was no...
While you do your thing. Now, This Morning with Audie Cornish. Weekdays at 6 a.m. on CNN.
Tonight, the National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, says he's responsible for adding the Atlantic's editor-in-chief, Jeffrey Goldberg, into that group chat where he and other officials talked openly about military strike plans. It contradicts what we heard from President Trump earlier this morning when he told NBC News, quote, it was one of Michael's people on the
Most fundamental point. I mean, there are a lot of permutations of this. Did they violate the federal record-keeping statutes? Did they do this? Did they do the other thing? Were there war plans actually released? I mean, war plans is a term of jargon at the Pentagon. They have specific numbers for specific countries. I'm not going to get into it in more detail, but things can be less than war plans and still reveal a lot. Here's the original sin. Using Signal at all. The government has spent billions of dollars over decades building what I think is the world's most secure telecommunications system. Once you're on that system, you don't have to worry about whether it's classified information or whether you read it in the paper this morning, whether it's top secret code word information, because you're completely protected. You're completely protected sitting in the Situation Room, which is where group chats really ought to take place. The question that nobody has answered here satisfactorily is, why would you, if you're talking about anything that could be sensitive, why do you go away from the government's own secure network, where it doesn't matter what the level of classification is because presumably it's secure? Once you take that step, you're jumping into the deep blue sea, and everything that follows from the decision to use Signal and the decision of every member of that group to participate in it on a continuing basis, that's where you're in trouble right there.
Why do you think they are using Signal? I mean, what does that say to you about this, or whether they're using it in other instances as well?
Well, that is a critical question that somebody better try and have an answer for. I think the reason is a lot of people, including a lot of reporters,
do make a pretty cute